welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching Beetlejuice, the sequel to the classic Beetlejuice. There you go, I've said it 3 times. And yeah, this is the long awaited sequel, and, you know, look, in recent years, like the last 10 years, I guess, maybe not so recent, you know, we've had this wave of legacy sequels, you know, these long dormant franchises that come back with a sequel, and they have to have all the nostalgia bait and all the references and all that stuff. And Beetlejuice 2, I'm just gonna call it Beetlejuice 2. Anyways, it comes off a little different, I think, and it definitely helps the fact that it's got the same director and the same writers, or at least some of the same writers, and obviously like a lot of the same cast are coming back, and it doesn't, I don't know, in a ways that other legacy sequels feel like, oh, we gotta pass the baton to the next generation, and yes, this movie does do that. It just doesn't feel as nostalgia baity as some other ones do. You know, it feels more like a genuine continuation of the same world, you know, like this is just how things would naturally progress this way, and here we are. So I will be going over some non-spoiler stuff. I'm just going to give my overall thoughts of the movie, and then I'll go into some spoiler stuff. So here we go. First, non-spoilers. Like I said, this movie feels like it is just in the same world. You know, they're using a lot of the same practical effects, a lot of the stop motion stuff, a lot of the, you know, real sets, and a lot of the props and the miniatures and all that stuff. And so it definitely feels a lot of times like you could just pop this one in right after you watch the original, and, you know, obviously with the footage looking better, you know, newer footage, but it feels very much like it's in the same world. It doesn't feel out of place at all. So that's really cool. And also, you know, look, being able to spend a lot more time in this kind of dark humor, twisted kind of fantasy worlds of the afterlife, where like people die and their ghost versions have like a comedic version of however they died. So like if someone, you know, if someone got bit by a shark, for example, you know, in their ghost version they might have a shark hanging onto them, you know, or something like that, you know. So it's always just kind of like a funny dark humor kind of thing, and that's just living in this world. You just get a lot of that in this, especially because I think we spend so much more time in the afterlife in this movie than we did in the original, so we just get to see a lot more of that stuff, and it's really cool. I think if I had any really major gripes with this movie, and it's not like a deal breaker or anything, it's more just that the word I would use is unfocused. It feels like, as I'm watching it, I can definitely see how there were several different versions of this movie over the decades even, where they kept changing their minds, like, well, we could have one story that does this, and we could have one story that does that. And this movie very much feels like they had 2 different ideas that could have been their own individual movies, and they just kind of made a compromise, and they're like, look, let's just do both of these stories in the same movie, and we're gonna try to find a way to make them work together. And, you know, unfortunately, I think especially near the end, it doesn't always feel like they mesh together so well, because you have some plot points that were really built up, and then they're kind of just stopped. You know, they're kind of just quickly dealt with and ended, and then we move on because the other version of this movie has to continue, and then we got to move back to the other version of the movie. And it's like, it feels at times like the movie didn't know what it wanted to be. It had 2 different versions inside of it that was like fighting each other sometimes, and I'm like, I kind of wish they would have just picked one story and told that story, and then do a third one later where you can tell the other story. It's okay, because yeah, it very much feels like there's 2 completely different ideas here. So I don't know, that's really my only negative here. I think everything else about this really works, you know. We get a lot of good cameos, a lot of new interesting characters, even though, you know, like I said, some of them are kind of stuck in that position of being from one side of the story instead of the other, and so they don't get as much screen time, and I'll go over that in some spoilers. But yeah, otherwise, look, if you're a fan of Beetlejuice, you're gonna love this movie. I think it has everything you've been wanting to have. Like, you know, all the flavor, all the set pieces, all the costuming, all the humor, everything about it, all the weirdness, it's all here. So like, I don't think anyone is gonna have any major complaints about this movie. I think it's gonna do really well, or at least well enough. And yeah, I think this is among legacy sequels and a lot of other stuff that we've seen come out recently. They did a pretty damn good job here. So like, good job, you did it. You finally made another Beetlejuice movie. And I have to imagine sooner rather than later we will see another one. You know, at least within the next 5 years, another one will show up, because there's obviously like stuff left over that you can make more stories with. So it's pretty cool. Now I'm gonna go into some spoilers here. We're gonna talk about like some story elements. I'm not gonna do a whole recap, but like, I'm gonna cover really what my main gripe is and better explain what that is in the spoiler section. So here we go. Spoilers. Okay, so this movie doesn't really know what it wants to be between these two stories that they're trying to tell. One story is about Beetlejuice's origin, you know, like his origin, where he had married this lady and she turns out to have been part of a soul eating cult, and basically they killed each other, and that's how he became Beetlejuice. And she ends up being able to piece herself together in the afterlife, and now she's hunting Beetlejuice down, because even in the afterlife, because she can eat souls, she's able to even kill people in the afterlife. So they're like twice as dead, right? So she's actually a threat. And so throughout the movie, she's hunting Beetlejuice down. And then we have this detective character with Willem Dafoe who's trying to stop her. And that's like a whole story on its own, right? Like, that feels like enough to be a whole movie. Like that could be the other Beetlejuice movie. And within this movie as well, we have the other plot line. So we have Lydia Dietz, and you know, her dad dies. And by the way, yes, the actor did horrible things. You can Google it. He's not in the movie. They handle his death in kind of a funny way. The character, surprisingly enough, is in the movie quite a bit, but obviously the actor's not here, so they they said that he was attacked by a shark, and so he's missing his entire top half. So he's just walking around as this like shark bitten torso. So it's kind of funny. Anyways, but yeah, the second plot line really is Lydia's daughter gets tricked by this ghost, who she didn't realize was a ghost at the time. It was this boy that she likes, and the boy basically tricks her into trading places with him, whereas she will go to the afterlife and he will be able to come back to life as like a, you know, as a human. And they have to go to the afterlife, and so Lydia has to summon Beetlejuice and go to the afterlife and find her daughter and try to, you know, fix that whole situation and get her back to the human world. And that feels like the plotline of an entirely different movie, and yet somehow they like made this compromise where they're like, okay, so the ex-wife of Beetlejuice hunting him down, and the detective and all that stuff, and then this whole other thing with Lydia's daughter and being trapped in the spirit world, we're gonna like mesh that together. And I could almost see someone editing these two things into two separate like 30 to 40 minute stories on their own, because it really does feel, especially when you're like going from one part to the other plot, and it's like you can just feel how disconnected these two stories are. It feels almost like you're changing channels to two different shows. You're like, it's in the same world, but like these characters are doing completely different things, unrelated entirely from these other characters, and we are almost at the end point of the movie. So somehow they gotta like make all this come together at the end, and it kind of is a little choppy. And what I mean by that is the ghost boy who tricked Lydia's daughter, when they finally get to the afterlife and they find the daughter and they're like trying to bring her back, and he's like, oh, but the contract's already been signed and I'm alive now. They just throw him down a fiery pit and then that's it. Like they did this whole plot line and it ends so suddenly that it's like, oh, okay, I guess we just really have to get back to the other plot line, so I guess that's over, you know. Like that felt like it should have been more difficult considering all the hoops that he had to go through in order to trick her into coming back alive and doing all that stuff. But okay, I guess not. And then even then, the ex-wife hunting down Beetlejuice, and she finally shows up at this church that they're at, and you think there's gonna be this big showdown where Beetlejuice has to try and stop her, but they end up doing the sandworm thing again, where there's not really a fight. They just kind of like summon a sandworm and the sandworm gobbles her up, and then that's it. Like no one even like it's just over. Like it's not even like hugely commented on of like, oh man, my ex-wife's gone, you guys saved my soul or whatever. Like no, nothing. It's just, and then they kind of just go back to the Beetlejuice wants to force Lydia to marry her kind of thing, and like that's just, I don't know. He ends up becoming like the antagonist at the end, but for them to like wave away those whole plots that were carrying the rest of the movie and just go back to but he wants to marry Lydia because they made a deal, like again, like the first movie. I'm just like, okay, that's weird, you know. I don't know. I could feel the writer's room going like, we have these two completely separate plot lines, we don't know how to really bring them together, so we're gonna just kind of end both of them and then just do the ending from the first movie again. And that's really what it is, you know. And like I said, it's still a really great time living in this world. Like, not that I would get rid of these characters, but like I was thinking about it on the drive home. I was like, you could almost entirely edit out Beetlejuice's ex-wife and Willem Dafoe's detective character. You could almost edit them out of the movie entirely, and I don't think anything would change. I don't think any like plot points or motivations or any of the events or actions would actually change the end result of the movie. And so it's just kind of a strange feeling. Now, you know, admittedly, the original movie did end with them just getting the sandworm and taking care of Beetlejuice that way, so I guess it's in a similar vein of like, okay, well, whatever the big threat was, that's kind of just taken care of now really quickly and easily, so okay. But yeah, that's really my main gripe. I think something else that some people might take a little issue with is look, Lydia is now a mom, and she was with this other guy, and they had her daughter, Jenna Ortega's character. I can't remember her name, the character's name. Anyways, and now she's kind of with this really sleazy, the guy who manages her show. She runs like this ghost talk show kind of thing, and he's like just this really sleazy kind of business guy who's like just in it for the money, and it never really felt like we had a good reason why Lydia was with this guy. You know, they kind of go over like, oh, they met when she was at a low point in her life and she was, you know, like at therapy or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I guess, but you know, the Lydia that we last saw, who, you know, it was like a teenager, right? So like it's many years later, so like I guess a person can change, but I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, it doesn't feel like Lydia Dietz would have just been with this guy. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. And of course he is gotten rid of by the end of the movie, but yeah, that I think is another thing that people are gonna be like, why is she with this guy? Like, I think she's only with him that way they can have a character like that in the movie, because he's basically just a big joke and then he's gotten rid of, so it's like, well, it feels weird that she was with him in the first place, because otherwise she seems pretty confident with herself, so I don't know what's up with that guy. But anyways, but yeah, that is Beetlejuice. Like I said, overall pretty damn successful, especially considering some of the other movies that have come out recently. And as far as other legacy sequels, I would say this is probably in the upper echelon. I think this is a better legacy sequel than like Ghostbusters Afterlife and stuff like that. It does a better job of like just feeling like it's still in the same world. It's not trying to be anything else. It's not trying. It doesn't hold the original movie as some kind of sacred cow that we have to worship and be like, oh, we can't touch anything about that movie because it was just so sacred. Because like, well, no, it's the same people making this one, so they're like, well, it's just the same world, you know. We're not gonna be like constantly referencing that first movie. I mean, even though they do, because they go back to the house and they see the miniatures, and you know, like the characters obviously know what happened last time, so they're gonna reference it. But anyways, yeah, pretty damn good time. I think really the one gripe, and it's unfortunately kind of like a really noticeable one. I don't know if other people are going to feel the same way. I think other people are going to more just enjoy being in the world, just seeing weird and dark, humorous characters. But for me, I was like, I can feel the writers struggling to fit these two things together. But that's just me. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Beetlejuice, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.